Hello.
Hello, sir.
We are already live streaming here, so.
Oh, I better send all my bad things away then.
There we go.
Where'd Griff go?
Steve Hasbrook is here, but I don't see myself.
Hello, Steve.
Hey, Brian.
So we're live streaming already to kind of get things going here. So just FYI.
Shoot. There I am.
There you goes.
Yeah, webcam was turned off.
All right. Hello, Steve.
Hey, Brian.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, Eddie. Hello, Mayor.
Hey, Mr. Mayor.
I have my libation.
Yeah, I bet you got some of that. I better not say because we live streaming.
You know me so well. Yeah, what you got hiding under the table?
He has sweet tea.
Sweet tea. Yeah. Okay.
There you go. Sweet tea.
Yeah. If you say so.
I do.
Oh, Councilman Griffin, we can see you.
I'm digging the picture, Mr. Cook. Did you do that with a drone?
That was actually our irrigation guy did that for us, Conrad. So yeah, it was a nice picture for sure.
Yeah, tell them send it over my house. How's everybody doing?
Oh, doing good, sir.
How you, Griff?
Doing great, doing great. Tell them I need an aerial shot like that.
You'll come over there.
How's Big Mama doing? I saw her sitting on the porch today. She looked like she was doing good. I waved at her when I went by.
Yeah, she had a doctor's appointment this morning. I sent her to the doctor, right on back to the house, back on the porch.
Well, I hope she's doing well.
She is. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it. Morning. I sent her to the doctor, right on back to the house, back on the porch.
Well, I hope she's doing well.
Yes, thank you for asking. Appreciate it.
All right, we're getting feedback again.
That was a good recording right there, buddy.
Hey, everyone.
Hello, Councilman Griff.
What's up, Sloan?
What's up?
There you go.
Yep.
Hello, Jill Emery.
Hello, Brian Cook. how are you doing?
Doing well.
Good. Hey, Mr. Hasterrock. Griff,
How are you?
good. Eddie
Hello, Miss
Hey,
Julie.
Julie.
and Donna Brock. How are y'all?
I'm doing fantastic, Julie.
Hey, Miss Julie, good to see you.
Perfect. Good seeing you too, Eddie. I missed you at the farmer's market the past couple weeks.
Yep, I was there yesterday.
I know I came late.
You know me, I got to get there early.
Yep, and get all the good stuff.
That's right.
I missed out on my okra yesterday.
He had some good produce yesterday.
Yep, I missed out on it.
Does anybody ever sell steak or cattle, beef at the farmer's market?
The cattle, what are those girls called? The chick.
Crazy chick lady?
Yeah, they sell some lambs and stuff and chicken, but I think they've got beef there.
I
Yeah,
haven't seen it the last few times I've been.
That's a whole different authorization. You got to go through a lot of jumping.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
the shrimp guy was there yesterday though with mountain trout and live lobsters and everything.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, even to sell bread, Councilman Brock, you got to go through a whole licensing process.
D-Heck.
Hmm.
The shrimp
yeah.
guy,
Cooking a commercial
Proud of
kitchen
his
and
stuff.
everything.
Sarah Lynn is joining us for the first time. How about that?
Hey, how are y'all doing?
Who?
hey, how are you?
Sarah Lynn.
Good.
Hello. Early.
Hey,
Hey.
Sarah Lynn,
Hey,
miss you.
I miss y'all too.
I hope the mayor's got his gavel. It's 6:59. It's
I'm ready. I was just waiting
almost.
until my phone changes here.
Hey, Melissa.
Hey,
Sarah Lynn's sporting that nice shirt today though. I like it.
Thank you.
All right, it's 7 p.m. I'm gonna call tonight's budget work session to meeting. Due to the, it's Thursday, May 14th. The time is 7 p.m. Due to the current threat of COVID-19, Town Council will be using a virtual meeting platform called Zoom. Meeting will be live streamed to the public using YouTube Live. So public can please go to the Town of Blythewood website, find it there, click on the YouTube link and access the meeting. Session to meeting. Comments, questions before, during, or after the meeting may be sent via email to cookb@townofblythewoodsc.gov. Or of course, you can text any of us council members or myself as the meeting, and we will direct some answers to your questions. So let's begin with a roll call, please.
okay. Mayor Franklin,
Here,
Councilman Ballman,
Present.
Councilman Griffin,
Here.
Councilman Brock,
I am present.
and Councilman Sloan Griffin.
present. All right, thank you. And then Ms. Cowan, was notification and posting of the meeting agenda accomplished?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. All right, council members, before you is the agenda. And looking.
I make a motion we approve as presented.
Second.
Did we lose the mayor?
I think we lost the mayor.
All right, well, I'll go ahead in his absence right now since we've got a properly motioned on the floor and a properly second. Do I hear approval of the agenda as presented? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, so that's presented. So now we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation. I wanted to ask, and since it's not on here, Councilman Larry Griffin would lead us in the pledge and the invocation.
Yes, sir. Yeah, we have the flag that's in front of the building out there on the standstill.
Yes, sir. It's coming up.
I see it.
I see it.
Okay, everybody join in with me. I pledge allegiance to the
The
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice
justice
for all.
for all.
Would you bow with me? Father God, it's in your precious name we come with bowed heads and humble hearts, thanking thee for this day. Lord, we'd like to give a special blessing to all of the first responders, to all of the people who are in the essential care. We ask, Lord, that you'll continue to guide them, bless them, and keep them safe. Lord, at this time, we also ask that you just be with us as we go through this meeting. Give us the wisdom to carry out, to do those things that will be pleasing in thy sight, as well as the things that will be necessary for the town of Blythewood. We ask that you'll continue to bless each and every one of us, keep each and every one of us safe, and Lord, please provide the care that's necessary to get through this pandemic. In Jesus' name we pray, give you all the thanks and grace. Amen.
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 All right, do we have the mayor back? I do not see the mayor. He did send me a message last night saying that he would be out of town checking on damaged property, and if there was a glitch in the system for me to go ahead and take over until he returned. So hearing that, since Councilman Griffin led us in the invocation, we got to go Councilmembers Remarks. I'm going to allow him to go first.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem. Just want to thank everybody who's on the call, all our guests and visitors. Thank you for being responding and hanging out with us tonight through this council. We just want to thank all of the council members for being so diligent and staying abreast of what's going on with the town and the world. Just want to say that the farmers market seems to be a success. Things are going great. I hear all you guys are getting your beans, and I'm sorry, Julie, you didn't get your okra, but we'll make sure that we try to save some for the next time. We see that the new businesses are going up in town, and the town is picking up, and things are just continue to grow and happen. So that's all a blessing and a good deal at the same time. And the last thing I just want to make mention of is that, remember, I don't think we'll have another meeting before then, but we do know that the election for Richland County is coming up June the 9th. Just want to make everybody abreast so they can get out and cast their vote, because a lot of it has to do with the surroundings of what's going to happen here in Blythewood. So with that being said, Mayor Pro Tem, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Councilman Larry Griffin. Councilman Sloan Griffin, I'll give you the floor next. Someone let him know you're muted.
There we go. Multitasking. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, Council, members of the general public and Blythewood staff. Thank you all for your support, bearing with us during this COVID-19 as we learn our way around something that we normally don't deal with. We're working diligently to keep our town safe and secure, and keep you guys number one when we're going through that process. Of course, this past week, I had the privilege of donating masks to Palmetto Pediatrics here in town and the ER over in Winsboro. They're very grateful to have that type of support, and they're still receiving donations. So if you know of anyone or any types of PPE that's out there, they'll be grateful for having that PPE. Other than that, that is all I have right now. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, for the moment.
Thank you, Councilman Sloan Griffin. Councilman Brock, you will have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Let me get my video started back. Thank everyone for being here. I want to give a special thanks to Julie, Sarah Lynn, Mr. Meggs, Mr. Cook, Mr. Hastrock, his staff, Kirk, and who else am I forgetting? The grounds crew, Jason, Cecil, and Leah. I think that's her name. Maybe I'm wrong, Mr. Cook. You're muted, so I can't hear what you're saying. But anyways, special thanks to our staff for keeping our town afloat. Councilman Griffin mentioned the businesses that are going up. I ride by and see the Zaxby's every day that's going up. That's pretty exciting. I see their work continuing on the hotel. That's also good news for us. And I know the Starbucks is coming. Sloan kind of jumped the gun. I was going to give him a big shout out for donating the mask to Palmetto Pediatrics. That's where I take my 2 children. So Palmetto Pediatrics has a special place in my heart, even though that's not the office we go to. We go to the one downtown because we love our doctor down there, even though I have tried to convince him to come to Blythewood, and he says he's good where he is. So, but anyways, we do love Palmetto Pediatrics in the Brock House. I have also been to the farmer's market a few times. It seems to be a very good success. I've been to the park a few times. I've taken my children out there. We have played, and everyone seems to be having a good time while practicing social distancing. So with that, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, I don't really have much more to add. Thank you for this time, and I'll yield the remainder to you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Cook, I didn't mean to leave you out. So if you have some town administrators remarks and you'd like to jump on board and go ahead, I'll go ahead and give the floor to you.
I'm good. I got plenty later, so I'm good for now. Thank you, sir.
Okay, well, I got a text from the mayor and he's got the beach internet problem. So he said, drive on, drive on. So we're going to drive on just like we're doing. So, well, I want to thank each and every one of you guys. And I want to thank the town staff, Julie and Sarah Lynn and Melissa, for what they do. Melissa, we just want to let you know that we're so proud of you and the job that you do. And as you got those lovely flowers last week, we just hope you know that what you mean to the operation of town council and how we operate here in Blythewood. I'd like for every one of y'all to remember the family of Miss Eula Bloom Sheely, who passed away early yesterday morning. She's a lifelong resident of Blythewood. She was 89 years old. Chives is in charge, and they will have a graveside service for her at Sandy Level Baptist Church at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon. She's been a lifelong member up there, except the time she was in a different Baptist church like Lake Ashley or something down in Charleston, I believe was the name of it. But her and her husband resided here. She has got grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. So just remember that family. I too would like to thank Councilman Griffin for what they do for Palmetto Pediatrics. Our grandchildren go there. One thing I don't know if he realizes, but there's a new extractor down at McGrady Training Center that will sanitize N95 masks, and they can do so many more to give them life. And each one of those masks can be redone 20 times. And as I understand it, that went into operation today. So that's a big deal. One went to every state, I understand. And just the one that came to South Carolina happened to come to Columbia and go to McGrady. So that's a big deal for us here to have it, to be able to sanitize and decon those N95 masks and get them back in service to our first responders and our nurses and doctors. So that's a big deal. As we wait on the mayor to come on board, I'm just going to go ahead and just, again, thank you for all what you do. And I stopped by and talked to Steve yesterday and give them kudos for what they're doing and trying to work through this. This is all new to everybody. And the pandemic's got us all not knowing which way we're going. So I just thank you all for the dedication to the town of Blythewood. With that, we'll go right ahead into our agenda. And our discussion items is discussion item A is proposed fiscal year budget 2021, the budget. So I'm going to turn this over to you, Mr. Cook.
You're muted.
So, all right, thank you, sir. I was sending the mayor an email there, so we'll get started here. I'm going to share my screen with you, and let me know when you see it here. In 1 second. Can everyone see the screen now that I'm sharing?
Yes, sir.
All right. So just as a reminder, this is a budget workshop. We're just having a discussion today. We've been working on the budget, still trying to iron everything out. As you can see, we have the meeting today for the budget workshop. We'll have a regular council meeting. It'll be the first reading on May 26th. And then we have June 22nd. The regular council meeting will be the public hearing, also the second reading for the budget. As you can see on the screen, our revenue comes in at different times through the year. This is kind of just a breakdown. And obviously the kind of big elephant in the room is not a surprise, but the manner, because of the COVID-19 has taken a hit there because we haven't been able to have any events there. So again, not a surprise, it was anticipated, but due to that and the future uncertainty, these figures for the manor are going to come in lower than what they normally would. Because of that, obviously, it's going to be a trickle down effect where the town's general fund or the hospitality fund covers the difference between what revenue and expenditures for the manor. So that is going to take some of the H-tax money that we normally would have available, and it'd have to go towards the manor. So there'll have to be that discussion about how we want to or not want to allocate H-tax when we get down to that. We talked about the potential last year for the fence, the decorative fence over I-77. Last year, we appropriated from our fund balance $80,000 towards that. And we're budgeting 55 this year. It's all kind of subjective because the bid that DOT had was canceled. So basically, if they do it again, this will be the third bid. So the discussion council will have to have what they want to do with that or moving forward. There's several different ways we could pay for that, but it's a discussion we'll have to have. As a reminder, H-tax also pays for 51% of our park bond payment. That's approximately $162,487. We get down to state accommodation, local accommodation. Obviously, those are taking a little bit of a hit as well with the COVID-19. People aren't staying in hotels. It's not huge, and I think we'll recover if we get the new hotel back online, and there are guidelines for hotels as far as operation now. So I think slowly things will start to improve there. Also a reminder, we use 21% of our local accommodation tax and 28% of our general fund to pay our park bond payment. That is in addition to the 51% that I already mentioned. So Steve Hastrock, the director of the manor, provided this list of cancellations and events, mostly weddings that have been moved or postponed or canceled. So we have had to make some refunds there. That's been included in your packet. What I'll do with this page, does that look okay?
Yep.
Everybody can see that pretty good?
Yeah.
Okay. What I'll do here, obviously this is our revenue under general fund. I can go each line. We can kind of hit the high points. If you have questions, generally the ones that come up the most are business license, building permits. And, I think those are going to remain fairly constant. There will potentially be a little, loss there, but as new businesses come online next year with the Zaxby's and several other businesses, I think we'll recover there. I know the fast food restaurants and gas stations are, still doing pretty good as far as drive-through service, at least. Franchise fees, they'll come in as normal. There may be some delay there, but all the other revenue, I think, is going to come in pretty much on time. So does anybody have any questions on the first page so far, the general fund revenue page?
I don't.
I don't, Mr. Cook.
No, sir.
All right, so I'll just kind of scroll through to the general fund expenditures page. Again, I know this is a lot of information. Had time to review it, looking through to see if there's anything that would stand out. Basically, it's all kind of self-explanatory. We tried to put notes on the right side to kind of explain a little bit what that fund may be. But if you have any questions specifically about this page, please just let me know. Hearing none. So we'll move on. Again, we're still under general fund expenditures. It's broken down into different categories under general fund. This takes in legal and professional services, whether they're audit services, planning and development services, accounting services, engineering services that we predict that may come up. Of note is towards the bottom is the Central Midlands Council of Government Contracted Services. We still had a little bit to pay for the traffic improvement study. So that's included. Also, we budgeted for the comprehensive plan. We need to, in the process actually now of the Planning Commission of starting a rewrite on our comprehensive plan. So more than likely, that'll be the Central Midlands Council of Government will help us out with that. So we are anticipating that cost. Any questions? All right, go on to the next page. So Public Works, best way to kind of think of Public Works, as Julie would tell me, is basically anything around town, including around the Hoffman House. This is where these expenditures would come from. This also includes the salary of Cecil and Jason and Lee, the staff that works around the building and outside. We have included in the budget here all the things you can see on the right. We did include a potential purchase for a new vehicle. One of our older trucks has been in the shop a handful of times this year. It's the old Chevy truck. We got a good deal last year on the truck we bought. It was under $20,000. So we propose to replace that if it is the will of council. I'll move on to the next page if there's no questions. Inspections and code enforcement. This basically takes in Kirk Wilson and the company RCI, which is the company that provides our building and fire inspections. I anticipate that our revenue, again, I know it's expenditures, but our revenue from the building in Blythewood is going to be steady or even greater than what we had this past year. I see more commercial projects. I see more residential projects as different phases of subdivisions and potential annexation of subdivisions. So I think that will go up as we move forward as well. Next page is Parks, Recreation, and Amphitheater. And that's just kind of is what it says. Kind of standard stuff here. If you have any questions, just let me know.
One thing, Mr. Cook, I know when I saw you the other day, we had the germinators in. Did we budget in that for like the germinators, the treatment for everything before we get open back up again? I know town hall had been done and I talked to Steve and I know that the manor will be done eventually before opening, but we added a new line item or we put that in somewhere for the budget for that.
So we'll have to go back and take a look at that. I don't know if we specifically added that in here or we had put it under services. Imagine if we haven't, we'll put it under associated services. Julie, do you remember if we added that in or do we need to add that in?
We did not add it in because we figured it would happen in this fiscal year, but for the manor, it's very possible that it will happen next fiscal year and the restrooms too. So we did not add that.
Okay. So that's a good point. We'll make note of that and talk about, where we can put that, because I think that will be a recurring cost, obviously, as we move forward.
Yeah, because if we're gonna do that every 90 days for right now, then that will be something we need to plan on for the future though, for probably this next fiscal year anyway.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. Yep, will do. So again, pretty straightforward here. Nothing much happening, obviously. Outside agency requests. These through the years are agencies that have received funds from the town. Some more than others, some have remained steady. We increased a little bit for certain organizations that are providing services potentially during this time. I know there was some discussion about whether we wanted to increase these more than they are currently shown or budgeted as increases. But if somebody has any questions on these, which sometimes we do, we can talk about that now.
Mr. Cook, as you and I spoke about with Mr. Meggs the other day, obviously the fiscal 21 budget, these numbers are going to reduce at least by the percentage of the reduction of our future revenues. So in other words, we missed 2 or 3 months of business, H-tax, A-tax, our operating budget's going to be reduced a little bit. So we just need to reach out to all these folks, all these organizations, and I'm sure they understand. And it's untimely because they need money now more than ever because of the COVID-19 crisis, but we're not going to have it. So we're going to have to get in front of this as much as possible and let everyone know that there will be some reduction to these numbers.
Yes, sir. All right. Any other questions? All right, I'm gonna move on down here. So, under capital improvement, these are transfers that generally are made every year for various things, as you can see on the right, for legal, professional, and sidewalk, vehicle replacement, roofs, HVAC. So, any questions there? All right. The state accommodation tax. So I think the state accommodation tax, as we move forward next fiscal year, I think it's going to recover. Now, obviously, we are taking a hit and we'll continue to take a hit. But with the new hotel, as I mentioned earlier, coming online and the criteria for hotels to start opening back up, being in place now, I think we'll start to move forward with there. So we forecasted, as you can see, for the budget fiscal year 21, 120,000. Year to date this year, we're at 114. We budgeted 94 last year. Again, with the pandemic, it's hard to have the magic 8 ball on it. But I think the new hotel potentially, if things go okay, will be online in about February of next year. And hopefully, things will be getting back, to normal by then. So again, it's hard to predict this, but state A-tax, as you know, is regulated pretty heavily by the requirements of state law. Certain percentages have to go for certain uses. So as we kind of move forward with that, that's something to consider as well. Last year, and we're proposing this year as well, the South Carolina Diamond Invitational and the Doka Rodeo. Generally last year and proposed this year, funds for those events came out of the ATAX. So potentially that may be a discussion that council may want to have when you kind of take into account the H-tax, the state accommodation, local accommodation tax. So I'll stop talking if anybody has any questions on this page. And we can always come back to this once we get going with that. So, and Julie,
Yes, sir.
the rodeo, they're moving to potentially November or
Yes.
October.
The thing with the monies that we've allocated for the coming year for the Diamond Invitational was $4,000. They generally ask $20,000. Currently, they've gotten $16,000 from this budget year, which they are not going to do it again. If they don't repay it, which I know y'all have requested they repay it, then if they don't, then only $4,000 would be allocated to them next year for that invitational. Same with the rodeo. The rodeo usually goes for 25 grand. They've gotten 20, I think, this year. I think. So we said that they would go for maybe 25 again and maybe have it in November and possibly again next April, which would be twice one fiscal year. And that's why those numbers are like they are without any repayment from this fiscal year. Make sense?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
This may be for Mr. Cook more so than you, Miss Julie. If council has requested that these organizations repatriate these funds, and do they have the obligation not to?
Do they have the obligation not to pay back the money?
Or rather, not obligation, that's the wrong word. Can they choose not to repatriate the funds? In other words, if we've allocated $20,000 to the rodeo or $25,000, they've received 20, and we say, all right, send us back the $20,000, and they don't, can we legally force them to? Or are we just kind of like, well, okay, if they don't, then.
No, I don't think it's going to come to that, Councilman Brock. I mean, the rodeo, we allowed to keep their funds because they only postponed for a few months. The Blythewood baseball, we asked them to send it back. Councilman Larry Griffin wanted them to send the check back. And so we all agreed to that.
Have they?
Good question.
No, they have not.
Okay. See that? Okay. Well, then I guess my question is, if the council, which I believe has requested those funds be returned and they don't, what's your recourse, if anything?
We can sue them.
Well, my request.
But guys, it won't come down to that. If somebody tells them to send the check back, they'll do that. I think we're just behind on doing that.
Right. I was just going to ask who did that? Who requested the Diamond Invitational to send the money back?
Right. We talked about it at the last meeting.
Right.
I don't think we followed through on it. So
Yeah. So that's why we haven't received it. And that's kind of why I did the numbers this way.
Right. So we need to do that because we did vote and say they should send it back and the rodeo can keep theirs.
Okay.
Okay. And there are certain state requirements to kind of go along with that about, how the money, shall be spent. So that could potentially be something we would have to talk about, but I think we're good there. Local accommodations. Basically kind of the same thought process. Year to date, local accommodations, we have taken in $103,349. Basically through the budgeting history, we have kind of shown that the revenue that we actually brought in exceeded what we thought we would get. So, while what we budget for this year is more, well, it's actually a little bit less than last year. We'll probably get more than we actually think we're going to get. Again, local accommodation is obviously taking a hit, but with the things coming back online and the new things potentially later on in the year, again, I think we'll be okay with that. But it also depends on, if we have a second round of, COVID or anything, of that nature. So
This is kind of the time to talk, Councilman, if I can, excuse me. About, do you like these events? Do you think they need to be changed? Obviously, there's going to be, in my opinion, a slight reduction in funds because our budget next year is not going to be what it has been. And it's just, you're going to see it. It's going to manifest itself. So like I told Ms. Cook earlier, we need to let everybody know what the expectation is. But things like this, to this council to decide, like for instance, the new Bethlehem-Berry Elementary School is going to start being rebuilt here pretty soon. And we're trying to preserve that gymnasium on behalf of the Bethlehem-Berry Athletic Group, a nonprofit organization. And I'd like to give them some money in an allocation like this because they're going to preserve what used to be, it will be the remnants, the last existing piece of our African-American high school in this area. And so we're trying to preserve that gem. So I'd like to see that here. So if you see anything on here that bothers you or you want to talk about it, let's talk about it. No hard feelings. We just need to make sure everybody's opinions out here when we allocate all these funds every year. If it's going to something that you don't agree with, just let us know.
Well, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Cook, I think that our local A tax and H tax are going to take a bigger hit than we anticipated. And just, I think we're probably a little aggressive in those numbers. I personally would feel a little bit better if we took a little bit of a haircut on our projected revenues. And if revenues come in greater than we anticipate, then that's great. But it's like Mr. Mayor said earlier, in speaking on some of the sponsorships of those organizations that we give funds to that provide services to the community. They understand that times are tough right now, and it's not just them that's getting hit. It's the town citizens, the community. So I look at these past years of the revenue for local A, you got 125 and you got 143 in. That was fiscal year 18, and you got 140, you got 142, 137. We're at 103 with 2 months left. I don't know how much of that's going to come in the next 2 months. Maybe Julie could attest to that for a moment if she doesn't mind. But I see that it looks like about, let's see, 13, about a 10% reduction in the budget for this year. I think that's fairly aggressive. I think that we should maybe look at the 20% haircut or so, maybe a little more, just to err on the side of conservatism. And then some of these, and I also, I'm trying to scroll down on your screen, Mr. Cook, it doesn't work. Some of those events that we've got down there, they may not happen. I promote an event in downtown Columbia. I get emails all the time from other events. Other events have canceled at least through June. And I think that more chips will continue to fall as the year goes on, simply because the psychology of society is that they don't want to take the risk and come out and be in an event where it's a high density, or B, business owners or organizations make a decision that the profitability of the events it's not going to be there because of said psychology. And if there's a second wave, then all bets are off. So I would rather err on the side of conservatism and take a haircut on our projected revenues. And then if it comes in greater, then that's great. And we have extra money and we can spend it if we want, or we can stick it in our rainy day fund. I'd hate to over allocate and then we have to dip even further into our reserves to, fund these things. If that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So what we could do, if I understood you correctly, with state accommodation, local accommodation, and potentially H-Tax, kind of the bottom line number that we're forecasting for this coming up fiscal year. Maybe tighten them out a little bit more on our projected revenue. Is that basically what I'm hearing?
I would just think it's better to under deliver or under what is it? Under promise and over deliver, basically.
Mhm.
So, if we look at it from excuse me, from a big picture, again, we may actually come in the anticipated revenues for this year may come in under what we budgeted, simply because we've taken a hit in March, April. We're continuing to take the hit in May, and it may roll into June, July, August. I don't really know at this point. But it looks like there's about a 10% haircut from 20 to 21. I think we ought to take an additional haircut on 21. And again, if it comes in more, then that's great. But everything that I'm reading and seeing is that, yes, things are going to start to ramp up, but they're not going to accelerate at the pace I don't believe they're going to accelerate at the pace that people believe they are. Some of these, some of these restaurants in town are opening back up, but, just because you open the doors doesn't mean that everybody's banging on them to get in. So, it's going to take time, in my opinion, before the general public feels comfortable coming out en masse to support all our businesses, traveling, taking vacations, so on and so forth. And it's not just us. It's statewide. It's going to be nationwide. We're not the only ones dealing with this problem, and we're not the only ones who are going to deal with these issues moving forward. So I think if we trim a little bit off and see where those chips fall, and then we can say, okay, well, this is what we think we're going to get. Okay, we're going to get less than the expenditures, and we're going to have to cut back a little bit and play our cards a little closer to the vest and make some tough decisions. And, when revenues fall, somebody ultimately, somebody gets trimmed, and it could be, across the board, or we could pick and choose. So just, I'd rather err on the side of caution.
Understood, Councilman. Thank you. I'm gonna move on to the next page unless there's any other questions. So hospitality tax. So again, probably the same thought process that we just talked about, and we'll take a look at that as well. H-tax is obviously what we fund a lot of our events from, in addition to stuff we do around the park, park repairs and associated work that we do around the park, landscaping project, for example. Also, I mentioned earlier, 51% of our base payment for our park bond comes out of H-tax. We're fortunate that we collect the revenue that we do for H-tax, but it is an uncertain future depending on what happens next year. So kind of the basics of this are before you. Of note is we take a good portion of the H-tax to cover the manor operating expenses, basically to balance out the manor, have it break even. So obviously the manor is not doing the business that it normally would be doing at no fault of anybody's. It's just certain times that we have before us. So the hospitality tax will bridge the gap there. So what that means is that the monies that were available last year for certain events may not be there this year out of what we're budgeting. Should you stick to what we propose will come in versus what will go out and stand within the proposed budget that we're talking about, and not a fund balance appropriation, there will not be enough money to go around like it would normally go around. Just for purposes of this discussion, potentially based on what we're forecasting, which if we shave a little bit down, it'll actually be less than the $72,371. But some of the events that we have traditionally allocated funds hospitality are listed before you. Also, the certain repairs, the front porch of the Hoffman House, the wood slats are kind of coming up. The steps are basically too narrow, and we need to pull those out and make them, more safe, providing a handrail. And so that's a project that we're talking about. You could potentially recoup a little bit of that money at the very bottom, that $55,000. Remainder of the fence project on I-77. Again, that may be a future discussion. We just put it in the budget in anticipation of council discussing that. Also, a reminder of last year, we did a fund balance appropriation out of the hospitality fund to pay for the bridge project. And we thought it was going to come in about $95,000. That bid was canceled. It came back in a lot more than that, which caused us to potentially have to add an extra $55,000. So that's where that number comes from. We don't do the bridge project, or we back up and we do something other than the decorative kind of wrought iron looking fence over the bridge, and go with, black vinyl coated chain link or something that would be less expensive. And again, I'll kind of defer to council's wisdom on what they want to do or not do there in a future discussion, but that's why that's in there. Potentially that could be used for events. But the kind of moral of the story with HTACs, we're not going to get as much as we normally get. What we get, we have to pay more to cover the costs that are basically the operation of the manor. We're not getting the funds we normally would get for that. So as you can see at the very bottom, that is up to about $254,500. That's about $182,129 over what we project we're going to have. So, it's going to have to be some discussion there, again, out of our current budget, without talking about fund balance and appropriations or anything like that.
That's a good assessment, Mr. Cook. Yeah, and I think what I owe the council members is, let's just throw out some raw dates here. Say that all the hospitality, hotels, restaurants were shut down on 1 April and it lasts through 15 May. That's 45 days. So you take 45 days, it's 12% of a 365-day year. So that would tell me that at a minimum, you're going to have to reduce your budgets by 12%, because you're not going to get that kind of money, because you just shut down literally businesses for 45 days. And this is just my estimate. It's probably more than this. And by the way, they're opening up now, but they can only accommodate 50% of their capacity. I believe that's the governor's order. So they're still not going to catch up for a minute. So at a minimum, we got to reduce these outlays, the ones that we typically pay, by 12%. And so what I got to do is give you all a spreadsheet before our next meeting. Even the Christmas parade, which we all love, and the community thrives on our Christmas parade. But that $7,500 is going to have to be reduced by $750 or $800. And we're going to have to tell them. I don't know what that means, what we got to cut out, maybe an extra stand. But the bottom line is, if you don't have that money and you're showing a deficit here, we got to make the tough choices in this year's budget. If we do get more monies in the future, possibly the events that happen at the end of the fiscal year could be fully funded. But at a minimum, we're going to have to reduce. And I owe you all that to look at it. But just look at all these things. They're great things. When we have baseball tournaments, we have spring markets, the film festival. But if we don't have that money to distribute, to bring in tourism and economic stimulus for our community, then we just got to cut them out. And so that's my take on it. But I owe you all that to see what we're going to have to reduce. And again, if there's a certain line item you don't like at all, then let us know and we'll look at it. Maybe eliminating it, or tell them this is their final year, whatever the case may be.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question?
Go ahead, please, sir.
So just thinking, do we have any type of data that will show us in the past what the events estimated brought into the town as far as revenue? Do we have any of that, Julie or Mr. Cook?
Steve Hasterot would have that information on his final reports.
when they, Councilman Griffin, I can explain a little. When they apply, they put a projected, and then when they close out to come back and get their remaining funds, that's those reports we see that show how many people from outside the zip code came. If your event was 3 days long, obviously they stayed in hotels. And then, of course, the really motivated ones, and sometimes Mr. Hasselrock does, we call the days in and the Holiday Inn Express and we ask them. Like, for instance, the rodeo does a good job. I just know right offhand because their report was very in-depth. And it showed that they told them how many days they had rooms filled. And then they look back in like a previous month to show the increase. So we do have it. Yes, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I think that will help me when looking at these events to really, see what is bringing in, and what we need to possibly trim back. There are some events, on this list that I won't trim back. I think Black History Month, the program that we do, is very valuable to the community, and the culture and growth of Blythewood. Just an example. That's one program that, I think I would not want to trim back. But I do want to see that raw data just to kind of help me gauge my thoughts. Thank you, sir.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Cook.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilman Griffin.
Okay.
Griffin.
Some of these events that we're looking at here, that some of these events are not revenue makers, and they don't use hotel. There's things that we looked at that will help the community, so they don't bring in any funds as per se to help the town. So it really is going to have to look at it item by item, line by line, and see which one of those things are going to fit into that. We proved a lot of them. We know that they weren't going to bring money to the town. It was going to bring continuity. Like for one that Councilman Sloan just said, which was the Black History Month. That doesn't bring any cash flow to the town per se. I'm finished.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Can I answer, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, please, sir.
Oh, yes, sir. To my elder Griffin. Yep, that was one of the things I really wanted to highlight, knowing that we do those, we sponsor things to stimulate folks getting outside and celebrating culture and
Right.
other various activities. But I do want to look at some like that actually generate revenue out of that. And kind of leading into something that Councilman Brock has talked about is, having some type of standard guideline or something to help us, with at the end of what programs, should they apply and things to that. But Councilman Brock, I'm sure we'll talk more about that and having a policy. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that's fine. And you notice on the agenda, we're going to talk about that a little later, about a standardized policy, when all these requests are due, so we can look at them all at one time and make judgments as a group. And we're going to get to that. Go ahead, Mr. Cook.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Cook, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate your back of the cocktail napkin calculations of around 12%. However, I think that we ought to be a little more aggressive on that number, actually.
No, I agree. I was just using that as an example.
No, I understand it. That's just basic 45 divided by 360. It's just basic math. However, the number, and I actually spoke to Councilman Griffin Sloan offline, and the number that pops into my head is 30%. And I think that our H-tax revenues, we're going to see a reduction, and 30% is just the number that just keeps coming back, in my head. I don't necessarily think we unilaterally cut every proposed event across the board 30%, because I think there are some that can be cut more. I think there are some that shouldn't be cut at all. So, you know, I agree with Councilman Griffin that it almost needs to be a line by line analysis of each event, you know, under a given a standard template, which we can make, which I'm happy to create in Excel, and you have everybody fill out the same information. That way we can quantify each and every event and we can compare apples to apples. Because you look at an event like, and I'm not picking on anybody, but let's just say the Rib Fest that brings a tremendous number of people into the town and it does generate revenue. Can we quantify how much revenue that generates for the town? Maybe, maybe not. It's tough unless you like physically call hotels and you can talk to local businesses, find out if they get upticks in sales. And then we can possibly back into a number. But then you go to the Black History Month event, and as the elder Councilman Griffin said, that doesn't generate any revenue for the town. But at the same time, it is definitely something that's important to celebrate our history and heritage. So we have to, I believe we have to find that balancing act between revenue generating events and events that don't generate revenue. However, they do promote culture and, you know, the history of our town. So.
Right. I see what you're saying. I mean, I agree. Now, I disagree. I think all these events stimulate the economy because when people come in to see them, they stop and eat and shop. They may not spend the night like the rodeo or the baseball tournament, but that's exactly what you're saying. If you want to do that, that's fantastic, and send it to us and let's get busy doing it before our next meeting. But I like that because you basically get every council member to give a vote on what they want to fund and by how much. I like that. That's good.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Do that. That's what we're talking about.
Mr. Mayor, could Steve Hastrock make a comment at this
juncture? Go ahead, please, sir.
I am the one that has been responsible for all A-tax, H-tax applications and payments and final reports. I've been doing it now for 5 years. So I'm very familiar with a lot of the background on these events, some of the financials on the events, and I'm glad to help town council and the mayor in any way I can to provide some information about what are the dynamics of these events.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. And you'll get just that. As these council members get this list, I'm sure they're going to call you individually to talk about them if they don't already know. I mean, obviously the bigger events, the rodeo, the baseball tournament, the basketball tournaments that are 2 and 3 days long, obviously people are coming and staying and eating every meal, and they're catering their events for their players from our local restaurants. But
that's correct.
But thank you. They'll reach out to you, and I appreciate that, Steve. Thank you, sir.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Cook, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Steve. Speaking of Steve, Doco Manor up next. So obviously, Doco Manor is taking a hit. It's just not a surprise to anyone. We, being Julie and Steve and I, we sat down and kind of kicked around, where we are and where we think we're going to be. And obviously, we're going to continue to take a hit at the manor for some time, even with social distancing. It's hard to do a wedding when you have to social distance. So there are some unknowns that are going to be there. But as you can see, we're budgeting $140,000 for next year. It is, again, it's an educated projection based on the numbers that Steve has and what we are looking at currently, what we expect, and the cancellations, and also what is already scheduled from July to December, kind of moving forward. I know Steve probably has some thoughts on it, and it's okay, Mr. Mayor, kind of let Steve jump in there. Steve?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I have calculated the revenue on the books for the new fiscal year between July 1st and December 31st, and then January 1st to June 30th. So right now, between July 1st and the end of the year, we have about $82,000 worth of revenue already on the books. These are people that have signed contracts. But for every month that the manor is unable to open or unable to open at full capacity, we will lose on an average of $16,000 a month in revenue between July 1st and December 31st. I have talked to many brides. We still have over 20 weddings on the books. Most of them have said if they have to cut their guest list from 250 to 50, they're either going to cancel, try and find another place, or possibly move into later on in the year. Between January 1st and June 30th of next year, I have about $30,000 on the books. That's a little bit more probably reliable income because hopefully we'll be back to full strength, at least by the first of the year. And also we do have some Saturdays and some weekends that remain unsold. And between about the middle of March and the end of June, that is very heavy wedding season. So we should pick up new business. To go along with that, because almost all the wedding venues in the Midlands area right now, they're still closed, 701 Whaley, Gala Center, Medallion Center, all these places. I'm getting a lot of inquiries about, is the manor open? Because people are looking for places to book their weddings. So there's new business being created. I got a call today. A woman wants to book a wedding for December 19th. So it really is very COVID dependent. And those are just kind of the figures that for every month we're closed after June, we will lose on average $16,000 a month. Now we can't offset some of that because our expenses will go down. If we're not open, I'm not paying my staff, we're not using supplies, the electricity bill goes down. That saving is $3,000 to $4,000 a month. But those are good, hard, actual numbers of what's happening with the manor right now.
And I appreciate you bringing this up because it's been on my mind, and I know Mr. Cook, and then I need to get with Mr. Councilman Ballman also from the DOCO Foundation, because there are ways out there, and I'm not familiar, and Mr. Cook's going to make me smart, I know, where the Small Business Administration is going to award loans and then later forgive those loans for nonprofit organizations like yours and the manor that are losing this kind of money. And if you can prove it with these figures, you show them how much, then we can get in that process. And we need to look at that because a lot of the small businesses I talk to around Blythewood tell me that there's no more money in that program, but when Congress comes back, I'm hearing they're going to allocate more for that program to help these nonprofits that are losing money to no fault of their own. So every time you have a bride calls you, Mr. Hasselrock, and says, I'd like to book, then you tell them about the COVID and they withdraw. Well, that is lost revenue. So we have to capture that. I'm not talking about the ones that get, so continue to capture that. And I'll get with Mr. Cook and we need to get smart on how we apply for those funds to try to catch you back up so you're not losing $16,000 a month. Any other comments?
You might want to look at the PPP, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Cook. I know there's still funds there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and
Mayor, just remind me tomorrow and I'll share a contact with you, regional contact.
Fantastic. Thank you, sir. Mr. Cook.
yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are certain things that are eligible for funds and certain things that are not eligible. I'll kind of get with you and perhaps Mr. Meggs, and we can kind of iron out. Again, some things are eligible to receive funding. Again, just to reiterate, certain things aren't, and we can have that discussion before we meet again and kind of break it down. But
Absolutely.
if we have no more questions there with the manor revenue, kind of Steve alluded to the manor expenditures going down, with utilities, electric, water, sewer. Unfortunately, the attendants that are, so awesome that work over there with Steve, part-time, they're not getting the work that they, do such a great job doing. It's unfortunate, but, so obviously where we are with it. Again, just to reiterate that we cover what the manor doesn't make to break even using HTAPs. So again, I know I've said that a few times, but just to kind of point that out, that it's a bigger hit than normal. So if anybody has any questions on this page, I'll move on.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Back up at the top for part-time employees. When was the last time any increase was done in pay scales on part-time?
So attendance at the manor, with the exception of two that I can think of, it hasn't been in the last few years since I've been here. Generally, most of the folks across the board make similar, part-time is
$12 an hour. $12 an hour. And I've been director of the manor for 5 years. There's never been a pay increase for the irregular part-time manor attendants or cleaning crew or setup crew.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
all right. Manor Capital Improvement Fund, pretty straightforward. It's just taking revenue and expenditures to account for carpet, roofs, porch fans, heating, air conditioning units. So that's pretty standard stuff there. So, and that pretty much is the budget, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I know it's a lot to kind of take in, and especially in uncertain times. We've taken note of the comments from the beginning until the last one from Mr. Griffin to consider and work with staff and the mayor and council to come back with a budget that is balanced and trim where we need to trim. And there'll be some discussion there, of course, with council on, kind of tightening the belt a little bit and trimming where we need to. And we'll bring that before you. But my intention is when we come back together to bring back a balanced budget for you. And then, of course, give me guidance on what you want me to kind of ebb and flow with on the budget. And what I'll do is work it with Julie and the mayor, and we'll kind of have these discussions and make the changes that we talked about today. And we'll get a new version out to mayor and members of council so you can have plenty of time to start looking at it. Again, our next meeting will be the first reading on the budget. So that's coming up again on May 26th. So that's just the first reading. We'll have the second reading or the public hearing in June, a regularly called meeting in June. So we have some time. I think we had some good comments, and it'll help staff as we continue to iron out the budget. So thank you for that.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Mr. Cook, I missed something in my notes, and I do apologize. On page 9 for outside agency request, how is that column worked? And what's the criteria for agencies requesting?
So the criteria for adding outside agencies to that is council votes to add it, and then we just add it. So there's that's pretty much the answer.
Okay. I'll submit to you my proposal on the agency for the next reading.
Okay.
Absolutely. And if you would do that before, if you could, Councilman Griffin, the younger, so we could start passing that around in this spreadsheet that Councilman Brock's gonna, and then that way we
Yes,
can.
I'll send a simple email
Thank
to you, Mr. Cook, so you have it in the morning, nothing fancy, just what it is, and I'll give you just a brief description on it in case you need that.
Okay. Great.
Thank you, sir.
Sounds good. Thank you, sir.
And then, Mr. Cook, one last comment I have. Any other council members have comments about the budget? Before?
Mayor, I just
Go
want
ahead.
to commend Mr. Cook and Julie and all the staff who worked on this budget. And I appreciate the way y'all presented it tonight. It's precise and concise. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about my dog barking.
That's all right. Mine's sleeping at my feet.
Yeah, that's fine. And Councilman Sloan Griffin brought up a good point. I was going to bring up, Mr. Cook, about salaries. He answered the part-time question for me, but I just need to know, just individually, you can send it to me, how long the full-time members have worked and what their salary history has been. Just a real quick email. I want to make sure we're doing right by them, even though it's COVID-19 and we're in a crisis. Have we let someone sit stagnant, say, for 5 years? And when the economy is moving on and people that hold jobs similar to theirs and say other organizations have moved on and increased in salary, just want to see if it's fair. Same thing we always do every year. So if you send that out, if the other council members want to see that too, that's fine. But any other comment? Go ahead.
Question. Speaking on that, you just brought up something else to me, so we kind of reminded each other a little bit. Are we going to explore some type of hazard pay for those essential employees that we still needed to really come in and interact through COVID-19 when we close to the general public?
That would be a great recommendation for the task force to provide to our council. But seriously, if that's what other municipalities are doing, and we need to keep pace with how they're handling this, because you're right. I mean, if you're asking somebody to come back in and they don't feel comfortable, I've even heard of some big firms out in California that they said they've tested this work at home and it's worked so well, they're going to keep people at home, like indefinitely, as long as you continue to contribute. So we can talk about those things, but that's a great point.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments about the budget? So we owe you a spreadsheet so you can line item these things out. Councilman Brock has volunteered. I appreciate it, sir. And then we can start looking at, but just keep in mind what I said about the reduction. I said about 12%. Councilman Brock said 30%. So somewhere in between, we need to start nugging that down and see. And then Councilman Sloan Griffin's going to add a new request. I'm going to add a request for the Bethlehem-Berry Athletic Society. Councilman Larry Griffin, what is the name of the organization?
Currently, it's the Bethlehem-Berry Athletic Alumni Association, but it's going to be turned over to Bethlehem-Berry Alumni Association.
Fantastic. All right, thank you, sir. Yeah, that organization, which is going to do great work in preserving that gymnasium, which, full disclosure, I grew up in learning how to shoot basketball and do PE at school and so on and so forth. But any other comments before we move on?
I have a question for Mayor Franklin and
Go ahead, please.
Brock, Councilman Brock. You're talking about the reduction is also in the revenue and expenditures, like for H-tax, et cetera?
H-tax, this is my comment, and then he can comment. H-tax, A-tax, and those traditional items that we fund every year.
So it's the revenue and expenditures that need to be decreased.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. In my opinion. Councilman Brock.
Yeah, I would agree with Mr. Mayor. I believe that, your revenues obviously transition into your expenditures. If you don't have the money to spend, you can't spend it. And,
Right.
I hope I'm wrong, but if I'm not, and our revenues do come in significantly lighter than we're anticipating, then there has to be some cuts. Otherwise, if we didn't want to cut anything, Mr. Cook could give us scenarios where we could shore up that shortfall. I don't know if that comes from the general fund or if there are other programs or monies that we could access that I'm unaware of. But I think it makes perfect sense if you're going to do a haircut of some sort, whether it be 12, 30, somewhere in between, then we're going to have, there's going to be a trickle down effect that to offset those the shortfalls in revenue with reduction in expenses, or otherwise we won't balance our budget.
Good, thank you.
All right, thank you all. All right, I'll pause here. Mr. Cook, do we have any outside comments from the public? Does any council member see any outside comments from the public? Either through text, email?
Mr. Mayor, I have not received any
Okay.
emails, the town email.
Yeah, feel free to let us know if you do. I just want to make sure citizens who are participating virtually have an opportunity. Okay, I guess with that, we'll move to the next discussion topic, the A-tax, H-tax request policy development. I alluded to this a little earlier. And this is an opportunity for us to standardize our application process, to make sure everybody submits it at the same time. Then we can have meetings like this to go line by line instead of having things show up month by month by month and not really realizing what we're doing to the budget over the year, to make sure it's solidified all at one time. And so with that, Mr. Cook, do you want to speak, or Mr. Hasselrock?
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think you hit on it perfectly. So the idea being that there's a certain time frame policy in place where we receive applications for potential events, and we kind of put those together, taking before council all at once ahead of our budget time. That way we know what requests we have as we move in, and we know, how much we potentially will have to allocate or not allocate. So it's just basically, like you said, trying to get it all together so we can see, what is before us instead of spreading it out through the year. And also a more formalized process. The state accommodation tax has a little different avenue under state law, but we'll put all that together in a formal process, procedure, and I think it'll be a good thing.
Okay, Mr. Hasselrock.
Yes, sir. I did go on the Richland County grant application website, and what they do, looking for FY 2020, their grant cycle opens December 2nd and closes February 5th. So basically, they allow you to apply December and January, and that's it. They also use an online grant system. Looking at their applications and their guidelines, it's very extensive. It's a lot more extensive than what we are requiring now. And if you really want to get a good look at, go take a look at their website. A couple interesting things, different than kind of what we do. They, on their final report, only require the budget figures for the how the grant money was spent, not the entire budget, only the grant money. But they do require invoices and proof of payment. That's not something that we've done. I also believe, and I can't find it, but I know it's there, I believe Richland County will only fund 50% of any project. And we, through H-tax, whatever, we have a lot of events and projects we fund almost 100% with our funds. So their final report, they really are looking for more quantitative data rather than anecdotal data, which is, it's hard to get. But I'm going to take a further look at their application process and make some recommendations on how we can make ours better and get better data and explanations and forecasts from the people that apply for our money.
Right, and if you recommend that you think there should be 2 applications, a semi-annual system instead of annual, then let us know that too. In other words, instead of 2 December to 5, you have 2 dates. You have one due 5 December, you have one in the fall due 30 August, for instance.
Right, because our events are spread out over the year. Mm-hmm. Our first funded event, I think, is Black History Month in February. And then you have Rib Fest but we go almost all the way through the year. The last funded event is the Christmas parade. So right. we could have 2 cycles depending on kind of where your event falls.
Right. If you think that'll be easier, but either way, we're just trying to get the books as easy as possible to control, because as they're coming in now, they just come in a month or 2 before the event, and there's a new event that comes in town, and then they send that in, and it kind of eats the budget. Yeah, obviously.
That's exactly right.
Okay. Any comments?
Mr. Mayor, I also would like to add that the templates or framework that I'm going to look to create could actually walk hand in hand with this standardization policy, because quite frankly, every event that applies for money needs, in my opinion, needs to fill out the basic 3 financial statements. You need to see a balance sheet, an income statement, and a statement of cash flows. That standardizes everyone, and we can compare apples to apples. And then we can start looking at the organizations that are successful, the ones that are bringing events into the town and are actually making money. And then we can say, okay, your event or organization is healthy. And then we can, as we've discussed, start to pull back a little bit and free up some capital for either other events, capital projects, whatever we see fit to fund. But we can't do that unless we know the financial health of each and every organization that comes before us. And the only way to do that is to give them a spreadsheet and say, hey, fill this out to the best of your ability. If you're a new event, give us your projections. If you're an established event like the rodeo, they should have 3, 4, 5 years worth of data. And, year 1, year 2, year 3 should build upon it. And then we should be able to say, oh, okay, you're doing fantastic. Or maybe it's an event that we all believe in. They just haven't quite gotten over that hurdle yet. So it'll at least allow us to look at everybody side by side and make it easy to compare. That's the quantitative side. The qualitative side is where Steve will have to come in and that'll be a combination of what Mr. Hastrock thinks, what council thinks, and then what the applicant thinks as far as, an event's, adding culture or bringing. I'm drawing a blank right now as to what I can think about.
Right,
It,
enriches the citizenry of
but
Blythewood.
yes, exactly. That's actually a great word, enrichment. So we can have almost a two-part process. One that's just very streamlined, straightforward, numbers based, and everyone is on equal footing. And then you add the qualitative side, whereas you have an opportunity, or an applicant will have an opportunity to essentially sell themselves to the council and the town. You'll want to look at both of them.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'd like to make one more comment, please.
Go ahead, Mr. Hastrock.
In the whole grant process, one of the issues that town council and the previous mayor has discussed at length is the issue of if an event makes a profit, quote unquote profit, do we still allow that? Or if they make a lot of money, should they return a certain percentage of that money or allocate that money to the next year? So that's another important issue that as we go through this whole process, we ought to discuss.
Right, and that goes hand in hand with what you said about should they show their whole financial statement or just account like Richland County does, just
Right.
account for the piece that you got. And it was my understanding, and I think y'all can correct me, Mr. Cook knows this, the state accommodations tax can only go to nonprofit organizations. Is that correct?
There is statutory requirements for each fund, what has to be allocated for what percentage, specifically state accommodation tax. So there are some very specific state law requirements we'll have to incorporate into what we're going to create, being hopefully a simplified process that's 10 pages long that that people can pick up and just understand, and there'll be some accountability there.
Right. And where I was going with this is, correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe Mr. Mayes can help me out with this. A nonprofit organization is supposed to keep their books open to the public anyway. Isn't that correct?
I'm coming up.
Like a nonprofit organization who asks for H-tax or A-tax.
No, I got the question.
Okay, sorry.
I was trying to get my ugly mug back on the screen, but
Well, sorry, we don't have to see that. We don't have to see that.
well, I don't need to see it either. That's why I cut it off. The nonprofits, the charitable organizations have to file annual reports with the Secretary of State, which are available for public inspection. I don't think they're terribly detailed, but there is a level of reporting at the Secretary of State's level.
Okay, yes, sir. So we could always ask them for that in addition to an application for one of our grants.
You could do that, and if they're asking you for money or a handout, with that, I don't mean that in a negative sense. But if they're coming to you for some grace, you can ask them to provide whatever you want
Right.
them.
And I think that's Councilman Brock's point there. Just
Yeah, sure.
show us how healthy you are, what you're going to do with the money. Then after you do it, show us your receipts, show us how much you had left over. And maybe next year you could self-fund and we could go on to something else.
Well, I think the reports that they file with the Secretary of State would be at a minimum what you would ask for. You would probably want a little more detail, just simply because, you know, if someone's going to come to us asking for funding, then we should be able, especially if they're not for profit, we should be able to ask, where are all your pennies going, quite frankly.
Right, exactly.
You're right. I think you know, unless you're under some obligation to provide funding, you can ask for whatever you want to see. Absolutely.
Okay, that's good. We're gonna have to add that to the policy. And I'll tell you that Mr. Hasselrock just intrigued me. I did not know that Richland County only provides 50% of the grant funding. So if you come and you have a concert that you want to play in a park, it's going to cost you $50,000 total. The county will only provide 25. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Hasselrock?
Yes, sir. I have to confirm that, but that's my understanding.
Okay, that's interesting because I know in the past we just provide what the event's going to cost. And then to Mr. Brock's point, Councilman Brock's point, a lot of times the individual organizations will go out and get more sponsors to make more money. Then they have what that would, you know, look like profits over expenses, or in my case, a profit, the way I look at it. And then next year they come back and ask for the exact same amount as opposed to deducting that profit and becoming a self-standing organization. Okay, we're going to look at that in the policy, and that's going to be forthcoming. Any other comments about that?
I need to make one more comment, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
If you look at the statutory requirements from the state, the wording says any organization that gets ATAX funds has to be a nonprofit. But if you look at the Richland County guidelines, it says they have to be a 501c3. There are other types of nonprofit organizations that are not a 501c3. So we would have to decide, you know, which wording we want to use, straight nonprofit or only 501c3.
Okay, excellent. Good point. Any other comments?
Are we going to look at like an online portal to kind of make some of that process easier later on?
We certainly could do that. It would probably help you, Mr. Hasselrock, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. Because everything would be standardized, and you know, if we had to, we could set up an automatic reminder system via email or something like that. So yeah, that'd be great.
Mm-hmm. All right. Any other comments?
I have just a general question for council, since I'm relatively new. Has it always been the town's policy to fund 80% up front and then do 20 on the back end? Doesn't that seem a little counterintuitive? And the reason I ask this question is, if you've got an event that comes before you, let's just call it ABC event, and they're asking for $15,000. And then we say, okay, we've awarded you your $15,000. And then they go out and they raise $15,000 in sponsorships to have their event. Okay. So then they come back before us and say, okay, they asked for 15, we gave them 12. They go out and raise 15. It costs them 15. Well, they're in the black by 12. Then they come back and ask for their remaining 20%. So they want another 3K. So then they've got 15. Has it always been that way? It would seem that if you do have these events that go out and they raise sponsorships and they end up with more money than they started with, and let's just assume they start with zero,
Mm-hmm.
then and I'm not offering any sort of suggestion to change any kind of policy. I'm just curious. But there doesn't seem to be any clawback provisions for the town to go back and take any excess funds back. The Knights of Columbus, I believe, are one of the organizations that actually comes back and gives any excess funds back, which is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I don't know if anybody else does or not. Not pointing fingers at anybody, not calling anybody out. But it would seem to me that if you have events that they know they're going to go out and raise sponsorship funds, they know they're going to sell tickets.
Right.
It might be wise to just, you know what, we'll give you a small portion of your projected expenses.
Right.
And then if you, you know, operate as in a deficit, then maybe we can shore that deficit up. If you're not for profit, you shouldn't have any profits. That's just some food for thought.
Right. Ostensibly, yeah. And we've talked about this for some time now, and I'm glad you're bringing it back up. Unless they roll that money over, and I'll use like something small, like our farmers market when they started. There was a bunch of people growing market garden vegetables in the backyard. They want to get together. So can we use the property? Then they want to make an organization, become a 501c3. Then they say, well, we want to put out newspaper ads. So they come and ask for $1,500. Then we give them that. Then it turns into a bigger and bigger thing. You get more and more people coming to the town of Blythewood. Then they say, well, how about we want to do a full service website where people can get information. So now we want so they continue to grow without necessarily netting money. But what you're referring to is if you have a concert and you sell tickets, and then you get sponsors to sponsor this country music singer or this jazz artist or what have you, and then they walk away with $19,000 in the black, but in next year they come back and ask for the same amount they asked for before, because now they're making money on tickets and sponsorships. That information, in my opinion, should be up front in the application. So we're going to have to watch for that in the future and ask those questions. But I agree with you. If they get a standalone and they can function as a nonprofit, and they can now do Oktoberfest, let's use the Blythewood Chamber as an example, and they're going to make all this money next, and then they should hold it and do the event next year with that money, as opposed to asking us for another $15,000, $25,000. That's what you're saying, Mr. Brown?
Sort of. We can talk.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, that's fine. You just didn't say it as eloquently as I said it, but that's
Absolutely not.
No, I get what you're saying. I think we're all on the same sheet with this. My intent is to use this money, like the law says, and stimulate economic growth and development in our community, and provide services like the Christmas parade, Black History Month celebration, Women's History Month, Veterans Day parade, which we're talking about, all those things to bring people out of their homes into the streets of Blythewood. And while they're there, they stop and shop. They stop by Blythewood Consignment, the B79. They go over here and get Groucho's or Prince's Pizza or Doco Smoked Barbecue, and then they go home. That stimulates. Those sales would not have occurred on that Saturday probably unless we had a huge event in the town center. And I agree with you. I think we're going to do that. And we're going to put that in the policy. Steve Hasrock and I are getting ready to get really busy here over the next couple of weeks. And put this in writing so you all can see. I'm not necessarily going to pull everything from Richland County for obvious reasons, but they do have a program in place that we'll look at. I want to look at small communities like Greenwood, South Carolina, and Lake City, and all the rest, Springdale, and see how they're doing it. So looking forward to that. Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, please.
This is Councilman Grill.
Yes, sir.
To clear up Councilman Brock, we looked at this a long time ago, and the 80-20 actually came because people did not have any funds and did not go over profit. And one of the things that I've realized in the last couple of years is the fact that whenever they get to a point where they make money, they come back to ask for an increase. So when they come in, they say, okay, we're going to bring in this additional person. This event wasn't, which costs more money. So there are very few times that we had an event that made money. It always seemed to come under budget every time. So that's why it wasn't that we looked over the 20%. Nobody was actually getting to the 100% money, so that we were giving them additional money on top. Okay.
Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it. Okay, any other comments about that? All right, moving to, and by the way, I'll close it out by saying within 30 days, I'll have council members a draft policy about how we're going to standardize this. So I know we can't get it obviously done before the budget reading, but I can take that back. Our second reading, you'll have it before then. But it'll be a second ordinance action item to pass that. So it'll be separate from the budgets, what I'm trying to say, the policy. All right, Restore Blythewood Task Force is our next discussion topic. So I will turn it over to our Task Force Development Chief, Councilman Sloan Griffin.
That's a new title.
Put that on the resume. Keep going.
Oh, Lord. So I'll keep this brief, so we'll move forward. But I think most of you know about the concept of the task force and, what we're looking to bring out of it. Just to update you, we do have a good list of membership that's going to come on board now. We still would take all any members to the table to facilitate those discussions, to look at different areas, look at what we're doing local, look at the effects local, and then to branch out and bring in some of those things that other municipalities are doing, such as the hazard pay piece. We're lining up now some folks to come in from DHEC to have those conversations. Going back to the SBA, we'll have some folks come in from SBA to explain and go over, some of the loan processes and available funds that are out there, and also help with filling out paperwork through that application process if need be. Just another added note to the task force that I'm including it in that piece is our District 77 representative. Me and him have been in discussion about a free a COVID-19 clinic in Blythewood in the town itself. I threw the concept out, and I'll make sure that you guys are all included in that process. When we get to the table, we're probably going to look at the high school Blythewood and or the park. We'll look at projections of traffic and try to figure out, which area will be feasible, and make sure that all council is aware and available on that day when it's planned out. They're going to do that in conjunction with MUSC and Prisma up here in this area. So I'll keep you in tune to that. But supply chain is another thing that we'll look at. Supplies are still kind of short. It's kind of hard to get. Miss Julie, I will get with you in private tomorrow because you will begin the stock of some supply in from Richland County. I bridge that in and I'll explain that process to you. Mr. Mayor, I'll also include you and Mr. Cook. So y'all are aware of that process and how to go back at that process in the future, because I'm not aware of any time that the town of Blythewood have requested supplies through the normal state chain during disasters. So I'll be glad to kind of map that out and explain that process in the future and give you a POC on the county and emergency management to kind of where you need to input those pieces to. I think that's it, just in a short brief. I'm not going to go through the PowerPoint. You all seen it, and it was sent out in the email. If you have any questions about it or someone that wants to be part of it, and I also invite every one of you to join in if you want to, just 2 of us, not no more than 3. I remember that, Mr. Mayor. I'm still a rookie, but I'm learning. Mr. Cook, I will ask for some support on Zoom since we have a full account, and that we can also put that back out to televise that so that the information is out there for the general public. That is all pending any questions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the floor.
All right, thank you, sir. And just, let us know when you're going to meet. And I don't know, Mr. Meggs, I guess council members could join a Zoom meeting and sit and listen as an interested citizen, couldn't they? If we're not conducting town business.
No, sir.
Okay, so let's not do it. There you go. There's your answer.
Yeah, and I forgot about that very important piece, Mr. Mayor. I'm planning the first meeting either Monday or Tuesday, pending me getting with Mr. Cook with the list of emails to send out, or he giving me access to send out a link. So if we set up a pre-link, I can do that as soon as the chamber add a few more people that were interested today.
I got you.
Thank
And of course, it'll be recorded, so we can look at it after the fact too. Okay, yeah. And I'm just gonna let my wife sit in. I don't care what Jim Megg says.
And
My wife-
Mayor, if, you know, we're really hitting it close to the rough here, talking about, you know, is it a citizens meeting or is it a town meeting? So I think the better posture would be to say that we can't avoid FOIA by having small group meetings.
Fully understand. Fully understand. Just know it was
Okay.
with good intention that I asked the question.
I understand,
Yeah,
man.
I understand.
Sure.
But
Okay.
Mr. Sloan Griffin is more than capable of handling that, and he will run it, and we'll watch it after the fact on YouTube. So, and read
Yes,
the
sir.
newspaper. We'll read the newspaper. Thank you. All right. Any other comments? Now we move to our action item portion of tonight's meeting. And the emergency ordinance 2020.003 extension. And of course, the governor granted the authority to have these emergency declarations for no more than 60 days. So that time is upon us that we have to extend ours. And so we have any discussion about the emergency ordinance extension? Any comments?
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, please.
Question. So one thing on that, I would want to ask council, you know, since we kind of, you know, we theoretically, I feel like we opened the park. We just, you know, minus the manor, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole again. But I feel like we might need to update some verbiage in there. I do feel we need to extend it according to the new executive order that was put out that extended the governor's one. I do think we need to follow suit and at least extend ours for another 15 days and then watch exactly what our state, what the governor does in the next one. But I do think we need to kind of update some of the verbiage in there that really looks at things that we have opened now. And we need to update that also and include about staff and telework and things into that piece. But I'll let Mr. Megg kind of guide if we need to change some of that verbiage now that the park pieces have begun to open.
Well, the draft that you have before you basically reiterates the fact that there's an emergency situation in the town and authorizes, therefore, the continuation of virtual meetings because you don't want to congregate folk and you know, have a COVID spread. And that's really all this does is allow the continuation of virtual meetings like we're having tonight for another 60-day period. But it really doesn't reach anything that's already controlled by what Governor McMaster has provided for in executive orders.
Understand. Mr. Cook, stroll up a little bit on that document because I want to make sure that I'm seeing the correct document here. All right, Mr. Megg, you're correct on that. I got a different document and it might have been that first iteration. So you're correct. That's what it was. It was the first iteration when we sat down. So I still got a copy of that one.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, we're not doing anything that the governor hadn't already ordered. Yeah. And we'll follow the governor's orders in the future, of course. But this just allows you, for your rules of procedure, to continue, if we need to continue to have virtual meetings. Okay.
So Mr. Mayor, if there's no other questions, can I make a motion to readmit that document for another 15 days
Yes, sir. Is it 15 days? Let me. Mr. Cook, can you scroll? What is the, what did you write in here, Mr. Meggs? I mean, as far as the expiration goes, May?
The ordinance will lapse as a matter of law
In 60 days.
60 days
Yep.
after the adoption.
Okay, and of course, we could come back and cut it off prior to that. If we were.
Yes, you, absolutely. Sure.
So if that's okay with you, Councilman Sloan Griffin, just
Yeah,
we'll
yes,
leave it
sir.
at 60 and we can change it if we have to.
And,
Yes, sir. So
and you may decide, in the meantime, you may decide to have meetings at the manor, say for your for your regular council meeting in May. But this would allow a council member or members to participate in those meetings remotely or virtually, even if you decided to convene the council at a specific location.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So
Well, hang on, Councilman Griffin. What would, I need Mr. Cook to read this into the record and then we'll entertain a motion, if that's all right with you.
yes, sir.
Because he's younger than me and I can't see it that well on my screen. So,
And Mayor, it can be read by title only. It's
Okay.
not necessary. Sure.
okay, well, let's do that. Mr. Cook, if you could read that, the title.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Ordinance number 2020.003, an emergency ordinance declaring the continuation of a state of emergency within the town of Blythewood and providing for the conduct of meetings of town council by telephonic and/or electronic means.
Okay,
So I make a motion to extend this for another 60, extend the ordinance number 2020.003 for another 60 days.
do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, it's been properly motioned and seconded to extend the emergency ordinance. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye and showing me a thumbs up. Do we have any nays? The ayes have it, the motion passes. Thank you, gentlemen. Now let me bring up my next one. Okay, next action item tonight is the painting over graffiti on the water tower. Mr. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Blythewood Water Tower, owned by down in Winsboro. Of course, it's right off I-77 in our town. Recently, somebody spray painted graffiti on the water tower, and the town of Winsboro is willing and agreed to paint over the said graffiti, and they're looking for approval to do that from the town.
Okay, Mr. Cook, now, I think we spoke about this a little before. Does this mean this will count as their painting that they're scheduled to do every couple of years of that water tower? Or are they going to take the money for this correction out of that budget? Or are they just going to do it as goodwill because it's their property?
My understanding that it won't be a total, will not be a total repaint of the tower at this point. We're in line for that. It will just be covering up the graffiti. That's my understanding. I will confirm, of course, but that in the email that was sent, that's what was relayed to me.
Okay, thank you, sir. Any other questions from the council?
Mr. Cook, is there a possibility of, instead of doing a partial repaint, let's just call it, and somehow getting us pushed up in the queue and getting a total repaint done sooner rather than later?
We can totally ask that question. We asked it maybe a year or so ago, and we're looking at 5 to 7 years, I believe, was where it was back then. I could double check and see if there's any opportunity to move us up on that list. I know when we talked to Winsboro, expressed the desire to get the tower painted, get the lights working, and get our new logo on the tower. So it's a work in progress, but we're down pretty much on the list of several other towers, as I understand it, based on that last contact, that are ahead of us currently.
Yeah, if you all recall in the local newspaper, Mayor Gaddy of Winsboro said he was not going to move up the painting and made some comments about when he was young painting water towers. But now this is a change, and so they want to at least correct it fix the graffiti. Any other comments?
We're gonna meet on the 25th, correct?
It'll be the 26th because 25th is, that Monday is Memorial Day.
Memorial Day.
Tuesday, the 26th.
Well, my suggestion is you're gonna be able to talk with them and find out whether or not they will move us up and before we make a vote. And if they will, along with Councilman Brock just said that if they will do the tower over early, then we can kill one bird with one stone. If not, then we'll make a vote on them repairing just the graffiti on the 26th.
Okay.
With that being said, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to table this discussion until May 26th to allow Mr. Cook to converse with the town of Winsboro to see if we can get moved up in the queue.
Second.
Okay, it's been probably motion and seconded to table until our next meeting. Any discussion?
We need to table it or just postpone it? Mr.
Well,
Mayor?
right. I was gonna make a comment
I
here.
think it's a postponement, not a tabling.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll get Mr. Meggs' answer out in a second, but my point is, why not make it a two-way motion here?
But if we table
Like
it,
if they say no, then just go ahead and paint the graffiti.
if we
Fix the
table it,
graffiti.
it's off the agenda altogether.
No, I agree with your
So it's a
procedure.
postponement, not a tabling.
But we can bring it, we can add it to the meeting in 12 days.
You
Mr.
would-
Hicks,
The motion would be to postpone to a date certain, which.
That's exactly what I thought, not table.
Yeah.
Then I would like to revise my motion to postpone to May 26th, allowing Mr. Cook adequate time to converse with the town of Winsboro to see if we can have our scheduled water tower painting moved up in the.
Okay, but let me, y'all go ahead. I was gonna interject and make a discussion point here. What the letter said that came from the town administrator of Winsboro is, and Mr. Cook could probably read it into the record, but along the lines of this, they have been hearing that there are certain council members in our town council that want to keep it that way. And so they don't want to do anything against our will here as the town of Blythewood Council. So they just wanted us to let them know, do we want them to paint over it and fix it or not? That's what they're waiting on. And I understand what you're saying. See if they'll paint the whole thing and move it up in their schedule to correct both problems, the graffiti and put our new logo and lights and everything.
Well, Mayor, that may have an impact on our executive sessions.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely right. Okay. But anyway, so I just wanted y'all to have the whole background. That's all. So I believe there was a motion to postpone this until the 26th of May.
I'll second. I'll go back and second it. Yes.
Okay, thank you. It's been probably motioned and seconded to defer this action item to the next regularly scheduled meeting of the town council. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Any nays? The ayes have it. The motion passes. Thank you. All right, open citizen input. Do you have any of you all, have you been contacted by anyone wishing to speak from the public at this time?
No emails from the town hall email address or on YouTube, Mr. Mayor. I know that Mr. Fry, Phil Fry from the chamber, he may have emailed you gentlemen a packet earlier today or this afternoon that kind of outlines some chamber events and potentially in the future. So I don't know if you got that or not, but if you have any questions or directly for Mr. Fry, available as he emailed me earlier this afternoon.
I have a text message too to get to pertaining to one of the things that we talked about, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, please go ahead, Mr. Baldwin.
I have a text message from former Mayor Mike Ross talking about ATAX appropriations and some of the things we discussed here tonight. It basically says, don't do this. This money's collected by businesses to bring people to Blythewood. Profit has nothing to do with it. It was set up to do, profit should have zero to do with what we appropriate money for to bring people into Blythewood.
Right, right.
Not
And-
what it was designed for. So profit, if they make a profit, oh well. If they don't, oh well. So I just wanted to give his opinion tonight, and just to let you know what we did have a comment on that.
Mhm. Yep. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Any other comments? Anybody else have any open citizen comment? I did read Mr. Fry's emails and comments, and I don't have any issue. Did all of you all receive that, or?
Yes, we got it. I got it.
I
Okay,
received the email, Mr. Mayor.
yeah, okay. Any comments about that, or, I mean,
No.
okay,
If I'm not mistaken, Mr. Mayor, that email arrived today at about 6 o'clock. So I don't know how many of us have had time to look at it in depth.
I understand. Okay, then perhaps we could address that at our next meeting. That's fine. Or you can address it back individually. Yeah, I did receive the same text from former Mayor Ross. I understand, absolutely. I think to clarify, I'm not necessarily looking at if you're making a profit or not, because a lot of these organizations don't make profits, but we're still funding them because they're bringing people to Blythewood based on how we got that money to begin with. Businesses pay this tax, accommodation, hospitality, and I agree with what he's saying. I think what we're saying is the larger venues who get all this sponsorship money and make all this money off of it, and then come back to ask for $20,000 again the next year, when indeed that 20,000 could go to the small mom and pop organizations who want to do a rib cook-off or a steak cook-off or what have you. So yeah, we'll watch that. We're just trying to get everybody on the same sheet of music, and we're trying to make sure that, their balance sheets line up. They're spending the money the way they told us they were going to spend it to begin with, and that all is fair and fair. I absolutely agree with that. So thank you for that. Any other public comments we know of? Let me check my email real quick. Okay.
Yes, just follow up on what you had talked about earlier, Mr. Mayor. For the Bethlehem Berry construction, the elementary school, the new start will start probably early fall or late December on the school. The old demolition of the old school is supposed to take place in late 2022 or early 2023. One of the issues that they talked to me about as far as the town is concerned is the signage that will go on the school, and to be in compliance with what the town district says is good and what's not good. So that would be something we'll be talking about a little bit later.
Absolutely. Okay. Any other open citizen comment? I don't have any here. I mean, I've had other citizen comments, but not relating to tonight's meeting about the traffic and what we're doing. So we're getting ready to start asking those questions. Been promised traffic circles. They're not seeing any movement. So we do owe either through our county representatives. Now would be a good time to ask them during election season to see what's happening in the county and state level as far as the traffic plan goes. We've been, we haven't seen a lot of it lately. Blythewood Farms is coming, for instance, and people are saying, when are they going to do that traffic study for that? Are they going to do it when COVID-19 has got everybody at home and it's not going to look like there's a lot of traffic? When are they going to do traffic study for the new school? So I understand what they're saying. So we just need to reach out there. So if any of you all hear anything about that, what DOT is doing, when their next meetings are going to be, please let us all know so we can get citizens out there to express their concerns. All right, any other comments there? Go ahead.
I'll just comment on that.
Okay.
From a DOT standpoint, there are no scheduled public meetings until things pan out with COVID-19. I do know that piece, so I'll keep you abreast of when they begin those public meetings back.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. Last comments before we move on. I believe we're going to do executive session. I've lost my email. Mr. Cook, are we moving to executive session now?
Yes, sir. We're finishing up open citizens input. So it'd be an executive session. So as we move into executive session, Sarah Lynn, thank you. Awesome. See ya. Julie, great job with the budget. Thank you. Steve, thank you. And Melissa, welcome to stay if you want, but thank you. Thank you.
Let me find it or read it.
I can, I have it here if you'd like me to read it.
Please read it, and then we'll have to make a motion. Go ahead.
The executive session item is discussion of negotiations incident to proposed contractual arrangements and proposed sale and or proposed purchase of property to receive legal advice where legal advice relates to a pending threat and potential claim or other matters covered by the attorney-client privilege, settlement of legal claims or the position of public agency or other adversary situations involving the assertion against the agency of a claim. Specifically, it's the Winsboro water agreement or what will be discussed in executive session.
Make a motion to move into executive session.
Okay.
Second.
All right, it's been probably motion seconded to move into executive session. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Any nays? There are no nays. The ayes have it. The motion passes. Thank you. All right, Ms. Cook, can you tell if everybody's off except for the folks who need to be here? Do you have that ability on Zoom?
Yes, sir, I do. We're good. We have all our council members, Mr. Meggs, and myself. And
All right.
we're
We're
good.
still recording on YouTube.
Yeah, we are. It's momentarily stopping.
Oh, thank you. All
It's
right.
1 minute there, so it's a little